Road. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Winnetka Village Council regular meeting for June 18th, 2024. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Ask everybody in the room to turn off your toys, and I'll ask Rob to do a roll call for attendance.
Thank you. Trustee Orsic.
Here.
Trustee Dearborn.
Here.
Trustee Albinson.
Here.
Trustee Handler will be participating remotely. Trustee Apatow is absent. Trustee Dahlman will be here hopefully within the next 30 minutes. There she is.
Okay. Now that she's popped up on the screen, I can go forward. Trustee Handler has provided the required notice that she is unable to attend tonight's meeting due to work obligations. Our rules provide that Trustee Handler may participate remotely unless 2/3 of the board objects. Is there any objection? Hearing none, Trustee Handler may now participate remotely, fully in the meeting, and the minutes should so reflect. Kirk, can you take the pledge tonight? Sure. Okay. Next item is the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. Next item is quorum check.
Yes. The July 2nd regular meeting will be canceled, so we're looking at July 9th and July 16th. Any conflicts? Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, item 4 is public comment. This is the time of the evening where anyone who wishes to in the audience can come on up to the podium and address Village Council on any item that is not on tonight's agenda. So would anybody like to come up and speak? That's fine.
Hello. Ooh. Hi, Ted Winchenko. Should have said. Anyway, so I see that you guys have are unsealing the meeting minutes of one of the two meetings from the decision to sell the sidewalk before there was any real public input. But what's interesting is that's the second meeting. The first meeting, the one that is still, in theory, apparently needing confidentiality, is the one where apparently the decision was made, because that's the one after which staff sent emails to the property owners telling them that the council had said that they were going to go ahead and do it. So it's a fascinating thing, right? That you wouldn't release those. Now, I know that meeting had other things, but it's not an all or nothing kind of thing, right? You can release the minutes of the meeting relevant to the sidewalk sale and still maintain confidentiality on the other matters like staff evaluations or whatever it was. But I guess I'll still keep coming here because it is interesting to me. You know, I have wanted to believe that public bodies work in, especially local government, work in the interests of the people that they represent. But you know, you look at stories from around our area and from here, and it's hard to really understand how that can be, given the choices that a lot of public bodies make, like giving away property. Or, and I appreciate Mr. Bernal sending me a little email eventually after I made my comments last week, or having a homeowner that has a permit issued that requires that they not cause damage to others, and then after realizing that they're causing damage to others, rather than the village and other bodies saying, hey, hold on, stop. No, they just say, oh, we'll give you this, we'll vary this for you. Oh, we don't have to tell anyone. You guys can do something different. And it seems to me, just like the street and beaches, which I can't go into right now, but all this stuff, it seems to place the individual interests of certain residents above the interests of the community as a whole. And one can only wonder what things drive those decisions that might not be publicly disclosed. I'd like to believe that there aren't things like that, but I'm also being pragmatic when I say I don't know. So it's a shame. I'll keep coming here. You guys should release the other meeting minutes. There's no reason to maintain confidentiality of discussions of the land that's already gone. So 6 months from now, we'll try this again. I'll come to every meeting I can. But then I wanted to bring up one other thing, and I know I may be running over my time, but I was in Arlington Heights the other week. And Arlington Heights now, south of the railroad tracks there, they block off for the whole summer like a 2 square block area, like a cross section of streets. I don't know if you're familiar with this. So, oh, you are? Yeah, oh, yeah. So it's fascinating. So no car traffic from like Memorial Day to Labor Day. The restaurants are, I guess, have permits. They like literally move out into the streets. So they have like barriers. They put out tables. I mean, it's very much a open thing. And people walk down the streets. There are not just restaurants, but other businesses. Like trinket shops. Have like little stands. And I was there on a Friday night just because, and I was surprised, and it was like very busy. But I think part of that is because everyone knows that it's there. It's not like doesn't come and go. And clearly, you can't do that up in Hubbard Woods. Green Bay is too big a street. Same thing with the Indian Hill area. But it's interesting. I was trying to think of how many restaurant facilities you have, and how busy the streets right here, Elm Street and Chestnut are. I mean, I wonder what the business owners would think about this idea of like, for some period of time in the summer, blocking off that cross street. There you have a park, you got a half dozen restaurants. I mean, they might be interested. And I don't know. I don't know how much important it is to have those extra parking spaces. So that's just an aside, not about the things I usually complain about.
Thanks, Ted. Anybody else like to share their thoughts with council tonight? Seeing none, I will close public comment and move forward. Next item on the agenda this evening is reports, and we'll start with Kirk.
No official report. I'll just comment the Music Fest was a lot of fun.
Bob?
No report.
No report.
Kim?
Just like Kirk, no report, but I just want to put a little shout out to our police and fire department because both formally and informally, we have received, putting my Winnetka Music Festival hat on, so many compliments about how safe and comfortable the entire environment at the fest felt because of both the very friendly and approachable presence of our police and fire department, and of course, how they handled everything throughout the day. So little shout out to them. Thank you.
Thanks, Kim. Village Attorney?
No report tonight.
Village Manager?
Just to pick up on the thank yous, not only police and fire, but Public Works, the Economic Development Coordinator, everyone put in a tremendous amount of time pre-planning and staffing the event, and by all accounts, it was very, so thank you to them.
Thanks, Rob. And Village President, well, I just wanted to hop on the Music Fest bandwagon and thank Val and Mark and Scott for being amazing stewards of a event which is now becoming embedded in our community calendar. The amazing thing that I experienced over the weekend was I left the fest early both evenings, right before the headliners came on, went home and got my dog, of course, walked back uptown, and the one thing that was really amazing was on the west side of Green Bay, how many people were just out in the street, sitting on the benches, sitting in the, at the coffee shops. You could hear the music perfectly over there. And just the amount of energy. There wasn't a parking space available in downtown, but just seeing all the people on the street laughing, sharing some stories and just listening to the music, amazing. Any of you who have lived here for any period of time, think back 10 years ago, walking uptown on a Saturday night, which you might have experienced 10 years ago. It was a flippin' ghost town. And now we've got a lot of vitality and a lot of energy and a lot of new families here. And the coolest thing about it is when the fest was done and I walked home, by the time I was 2 blocks away from downtown, it was back to quiet, sedate, peaceful, and beautiful Winnetka. So even though we had this major event with thousands of people, the neighborhoods were still very much what we've all come to expect from them. So thank you so much to the founders and the folks who really push hard to keep this thing going every year. And that's it. Thank you. All right, item 6 this evening is presentations, and we have a proclamation for Rotary's 100th anniversary. Tonight, we honor and congratulate the Rotary Club on its 100th anniversary for its contributions to the community. And I will read the proclamation. Whereas the establishment of the Rotary Club of Winnetka Northfield, since 1924 has provided Winnetka and the surrounding areas with volunteer support since its founding. And whereas the Rotary Club of Winnetka Northfield has played a crucial role in making the community a better place to live and work through its hands-on and fundraising efforts, including an annual Kids Against Hunger food packing events that has packed over 1 million meals, and an annual Operation Warm project that provides new winter coats and shoes to children living in need. And whereas the Rotary Club of Winnetka Northfield has provided financial support to areas around the world that are experiencing natural disasters through Rotary's Shelter Box program, as well as collaboration with other Rotary clubs internationally, including projects in Uganda, Kenya, Bolivia, Vietnam, Haiti, Turkey, Syria, Guatemala, Ukraine, Morocco, and other countries. And whereas the Rotary Club of Winnetka Northfield has provided annual contributions to the Rotary Foundation in support of humanitarian projects and the End Polio Initiative of Rotary International. And whereas the Rotary Club of Winnetka Northfield has demonstrated its commitment to making a positive difference in the community through the promotion of volunteerism and financial support of local not-for-profit groups through its community grants program, supporting annual grants to local and regional nonprofits, including the Volunteer Center, Counseling Center of the North Shore, Samara Care, Erica's Lighthouse, and Community House Winnetka, and many others. And whereas 2024 marks the 100th year that the Rotary Club of Winnetka Northfield has been serving the Winnetka and Northfield communities and sites around the world with its projects. And now, therefore, the Council of the Village of Winnetka does hereby proclaim June 20, 2024 as Rotary Club of Winnetka Northfield Day in honor of its 100th anniversary, and extends its sincere congratulations to the Rotary Club, Board of Directors, members, volunteers, and supporters, past and present, for their century of service to the community, ensuring a bright future for Winnetka for generations to come. May I have a motion to approve the proclamation?
So moved.
Second.
That will be a voice vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries unanimously. Is there anybody here from the Rotary? Come on up. Hi, Patty. You don't look a day over 100.
There are days, Chris. I joined the Rotary Club 15 years ago, and as a lifelong Winnetka resident, didn't even know it existed in Winnetka. So we keep a low profile, but we do a lot of good work in our communities and beyond. So we're grateful for this. We're going to have a celebration on Thursday night with the Rotary Club of Wilmette, who's also celebrating their centennial. So thank you for this. It will be prominently displayed. I appreciate it very much.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Thanks. I like doing those. Okay, we'll move forward with the establishment of the consent agenda. Does any trustee wish to remove any item on the consent agenda for a separate vote? Seeing none, may I have a motion to approve the final form of the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Voice vote, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries, and I will now ask our village clerk to read the items on the consent agenda.
Thank you. Approval of the warrant list dated May 17, 2024 through May 30, 2024 in the amount of $975,382.06. Resolution number R55, 2024, approving closed session minutes, determining the need to keep minutes of certain closed meetings of the Village Council confidential, and authorizing the destruction of verbatim recordings of certain closed meetings of the Village Council. Resolution number R56, 2024, waiving bidding requirements and awarding a contract to Resco for the purchase of 1,000 kVA transformer. Resolution number R57, 2024, approving and authorizing a Class P liquor license for Kemper Sports Management LLC, 1300 Oak Street. And resolution number R58, 2024, approving change order number 3 to the contract with DeMeo Brothers Incorporated for construction services for the North of Willow Road Stormwater Storage Project.
Okay. All right, may I have a motion to approve the consent agenda by omnibus vote?
So moved.
Second. Roll call vote.
Trustee Dearborn.
Yes.
Trustee Alvinson.
Yes.
Trustee Orsick.
Yes.
Trustee Handler.
Yes,
That motion carries. Thank you. All right, ordinances and resolutions, item 9. Without objection, I would like for us all to consider reordering the agenda as follows. First, we'll take ordinance number MO9 2024, which I believe is the playground. And then we'll move to ordinance number MO8 2024, which is Chase. And then resolution number R54 2024. The development agreement, okay, so those will go second. So we're going to move the playground up. Everybody okay with that? Kim? You okay with reordering?
I guess so, yes.
Okay. Take her away, David.
Good evening. So this evening, you're going to be considering some zoning relief in order to allow improvements on the applicant's playground, which is located in the R4 Single-Family Residential Zoning District. The Winnetka Public School Nursery leases a portion of the site on which Washburn and Skokie schools are located. The playground site itself is located in the area outlined in green on this aerial map. We've provided some current photos of the site in your agenda packet. The layout of the playground will remain essentially the same, with existing play equipment to be removed and replaced with new pieces. The proposed plan also includes replacing 2 sheds in the same size and location. There's an existing pergola within the play area that the applicant is proposing to reduce in size while maintaining the center portion of the pergola. The darker gray shaded areas you can see here are the mulch play surfaces. And then the brown areas are sand areas. And then the rest, light gray, is a concrete path that will remain. They do plan to replace the mulch and sand play surfaces with new materials, the same materials. The existing fence seen in the photos before and then here will remain. The proposed play equipment is primarily constructed of black locust. The tallest piece of equipment will be 12 feet tall. The applicant has provided images of all the equipment that's included in your agenda packet. In terms of landscaping, the applicant is proposing removing a 20-inch diameter silver maple. The village forester has reviewed the plans and has indicated that removal of the tree will be allowed given the tree's condition related to the constructed root system and it outgrowing its space. The applicant will be required to plant 1 large growing shade tree on the property to replace that tree. The other existing trees identified on the plan will remain, and then preservation efforts will be taken during construction. This is an excerpt of the zoning matrix that was included in the ZBA's agenda packet, which is in your packet. The existing improvements on the entire property, the entire Washburn Skokie site, are legally non-conforming with respect to the maximum permitted roof lot coverage. The maximum permitted roof lot coverage in the R4 district is 25% of the lot area. Currently, the roof lot coverage consists of 27.5% of the lot area, exceeding the maximum by 10.25%. The increase with the proposed play equipment is 31.7 square feet, bringing the total roof lot coverage to 27.57 of the lot area, thus requiring a variation. The existing play equipment on the site, which is to be replaced, is legal nonconforming with respect to the required front setback of 30 feet from oak. The proposed log tunnel and hammock posts would also be within the required setback. However, they'll be set back farther from the property line than the existing equipment is. This equipment will provide a 14-foot setback, thus needing a variation. And then lastly, the proposed sheds are just over 9 feet tall, whereas the maximum permitted in the R4 district is 7 feet. The school had previously received zoning relief for a height variation for the existing sheds. So the three advisory bodies reviewed the request, and there were no public comments, either in writing or in person. All three bodies unanimously recommended approval. At both the Plan Commission and ZBA meetings, a few commission members asked questions regarding the removal of the tree and the required replacement. And ultimately, each of those bodies both unanimously recommended approval. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, questions for David? Kim?
Yes. David, I have two questions. You just mentioned that the other lower boards did ask questions about the tree replacement. That caught my ear right as you mentioned it. My understanding was that our policy was if you take a tree down of a certain diameter, you need to replace it with the equivalent diameters somewhere. It might not be on your property, but other places. And it sounded to me like you were saying they only needed to replace the existing tree with a new shade tree. Am I misunderstanding that, or is that not a policy?
Sure. Our policy is actually, the village forester will evaluate each request on a case-by-case basis, taking into consideration the condition of the tree, and then also the ability to replace trees on the site. And in this instance, the village forester made the determination that they would only be required to replace one tree. A typical planting diameter is 3 inches, and so that's what they would be required to plant.
Okay. And my second question was, you mentioned that they were requesting zoning relief for the height of 2 sheds. 7 is the max, requesting 9. What is the purpose and usage of the shed, and why would they need the additional height?
So they wanted to replace these sheds with similar size sheds that they have today. And in order to accommodate what was explained at the ZBA meeting, and the applicants here, if they wanted to elaborate, is to accommodate all of the materials that they store in the shed. They needed the same volume of shed to continue to store those materials.
What kind of materials?
I believe it was,
Equipment, is it?
I'll let the applicant, if you want to elaborate on what materials are stored in the shed.
Hi.
Hello.
I'm Rebecca Levine, the current co-director at WPSN, and what we store in that shed is everything you can imagine that the children use on the playground. Everything from bikes in one shed and trailers, hula hoops, and then the other shed is filled with all kinds of sand equipment, big trucks, shovels for digging, pipes, loose parts, snow shovels, snow sleds, dinosaurs, pots and pans for our mud kitchen. We also have a section for gardening, for soil, for more pots and pans for digging. As you can imagine, we are preschool. We never have enough room for anything. Things are really just jammed in there. Currently, luckily, our school is at almost full enrollment. So the amount of supplies that we need, I think, have increased since those sheds were first built. I hope that helps.
It does. Thank you for answering.
Sure.
Others?
Can I ask the applicant a question? Back on the tree, because there
Yes.
was discussion at the lower
Yes.
commissions on the tree.
Yes.
You're going from a 20-inch diameter to a 3-inch caliper tree.
Yes.
That's a pretty small tree going in there. Why 3 inches? Why is the school not interested in a 7-inch caliper tree or something a little more significant to replace what is truly maybe a dying tree? I get that, but a significant tree.
That decision was made by the forester. So when he came out and that was his recommendation, we'll remove this tree, and he recommended replacing it with a 3-inch tree. So
Well,
I'm
David,
not,
I guess I need some more clarification on why a 3-inch. I mean, I know what a 3-inch tree looks like initially. In 5 years, it will look different. I get that, but it's a pretty tiny little tree.
Sure. So you need to take a couple of things into consideration. One is the area in which you're going to plant the tree. So the area is pretty confined in terms of this tree is surrounded by pavement, hard surface. So to put in a 7-inch tree, you would have to dig out so far away from the root system, and then to get the tree, because of the root system that goes along with the 7-inch tree, if I
You
could.
need a crane. For a 7-inch, you'd need a crane.
Well, I wasn't recommending a 7-inch. I'm just saying
Right.
3 inches is quite small. 5 inches, something a little more significant.
And then generally what the arborists have told us, that trees that do better when planted smaller, they'll catch up with the bigger tree, in fact, often, because as a younger tree, they're able to gain roots and grow faster. That's what's been shared with me.
We've seen a little bit of that, I guess, in streetscape. Yeah, okay.
Well, David, can I just ask a follow-up question on that? See, I guess I'll go back to my question about our policy. I thought it was if someone, let's say, took down a 15-inch tree somewhere in the village, it might not be on their property, if they can't, they would have to replace it with, I'll say, 5 3-inch trees, the equivalent diameter. Am I mistaken on what our policy is?
Can you add some clarification?
Sure. Let me jump in here. That's typically the case, but when a tree, and this is from our forester, meets the criteria for removal, given its condition and location, that's kind of the first standard. So if they wanted to remove it, he would have granted that removal, exclusive of this application. So, but all the factors being taken into consideration, he thought that the 3-inch replacement was the appropriate response, given that it already met the conditions for removal. David, was there anything else that I missed?
No, and
Okay.
that's correct.
Okay.
Okay, so because it was ill or meets the conditions, the replacement policy of inch for inch does not apply?
And not in that case. There is some discretion for the arborist, the village forester, to apply his discretion in the field.
Okay.
But in most cases, is an inch for inch, because many of the trees that are being proposed to be taken down aren't necessarily in a declining condition, based upon the information that he's given us, in most cases.
Okay, thank you.
Wait, can I just clarify that? And sorry for everyone for coming in late. So if a tree is diseased or dying, it's not subject to the 1 inch, one-for-one replacement. It's treated separately?
Based upon what he has explained to us, if the tree meets the condition for removal, that's how he would apply it. But generally, he's going to be working with a property owner to replace as much as possible. I would think you'd look at these as differently from one-off versus development. Yes. Development would be a different standard.
Others? Would the applicant like to say anything else at this point, or? Okay. I'd like to open it up for public comment. Would anybody else like to speak on this item this evening? Seeing none, I'll bring it in. And comments, discussion? We okay waiving intro?
I think.
Jim? You okay waiving
Yeah,
intro?
I'm a little concerned about, about the reason for increasing the shed size. I mean, we have 5,000 households and businesses and buildings in Winnetka who probably say, I have a lot of stuff and I need a bigger storage unit and a taller storage unit. And we don't necessarily grant that variance because someone says they, and I don't want to take away from kids having their toys and things in this circumstance, but, and I also realize granting a variance is not a precedent, but to me, the justification isn't quite there for why there needs to be a variance there, but I'm not going to certainly hold up the whole process for that, but I do want to share that thought.
Duly noted. Other thoughts? Okay, we'll start out with waiving introduction, see where that goes. Do I have a motion to waive introduction of ordinance number M09-2024?
So moved.
Second.
Voice vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. Now may I have a motion to adopt ordinance number M09-2024?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call vote.
Trustee Albinson?
Yes.
Trustee Dahlman?
Yes.
Trustee Orsick?
Yes.
Trustee Handler?
Yes.
Trustee Dearborn?
Yes.
That motion carries. Thank you, and good luck. Look forward to the construction. Okay, next item is ordinance number M08-2024, granting preliminary approval of a planned development, zoning exceptions, a special use for ground floor parking, special use findings for financial service uses, a preliminary plat of consolidation, and this is 791 Elm Street, Chase Bank adoption, page 61, resolution number R54-2024, approving a development agreement for 791 Elm Street, Chase Bank. And that's up for adoption, page 135. On June 4th, 2024, council reviews the proposed planned development of a new 3-story commercial use planned in the development submitted by the applicant, J.B. Morgan Chase Bank. Council directed the applicant to consider refinements to the building's design. Tonight, council will consider the adoption of the ordinance and the resolution approving the proposed development agreement. And we'll start out this evening with our Community Development Director, David Schoen.
Yes, so just briefly, at the June 4th meeting, after hearing from staff, the applicant, and 2 members of the public, the council did discuss the application. The council's discussion focused on construction logistics as well as the design of the building. In terms of construction logistics, the council wanted to make sure that we did what we could to minimize the impact of the construction activity on the residents and businesses in the area. And a more detailed construction logistics plan will be submitted as part of the applicant's final plan development application. Also, some council members expressed concerns regarding the design of the building. Some felt it was significantly different from what was presented to the council at the June meeting last year during the concept plan review, both in terms of materials and the design. The council's discussion at your last meeting focused on the corner design element, which some council members felt it was heavy, looming, and massive. Whoops. Sorry. So at the end of that meeting, the council discussed the idea of approving the preliminary plan development with the condition that the applicant, when they came back for final plan approval, would have to present a revision to the design, in particularly the corner element, that the council then at that point would review and approve. So in the plan development ordinance, we have included a condition that was outlined or in the staff report, so I'm not going to read it to you, but again, it focused on the mass and bulk of the corner element because that was the direction that the council gave us at that meeting. So the applicant has informed staff that they would like to review with you their overall design process, how they got to where they did, and then to review some sketch ideas they have on how to possibly address comments from the last meeting, with the idea being that they could get your feedback this evening and then use that to start fully refining the design of the building. So tonight on the council's agenda is an ordinance granting approval of the preliminary plan development, the special uses, exceptions, and preliminary plat. And then following that would be a resolution approving the development agreement for the project. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions for David at this point? Okay, we'll have Peter go ahead and review the development agreement. Sure.
So as the village president indicated, after the consideration of the ordinance for the zoning relief, what's on your agenda is Resolution R54, 2024, which is a resolution approving the development agreement for the project. The development agreement is very similar to the development agreements we've used I'll just mention a few things. A lot of these provisions are now, to the benefit of the village, becoming standard for our development agreements, and developers are generally accepting them. This development agreement is obviously for 791 Elm. It's between the village and J.P. Morgan Chase, which is, I mention that because it is not a single-purpose entity that we are entering into the development agreement with. The timing set forth in the development agreement is that the final PD, the application for that must be submitted within 180 days after the approval of and the effective date of the preliminary approval, and the construction must commence within 90 days after the village issues a permit, building permit. There are provisions in the development agreement requiring the general and specific maintenance of the property leading up to the demolition of the existing building. The development agreement specifically defines the stormwater, the sanitary sewer, the potable water, the right-of-way, and the landscaping improvements that are required. There is a construction schedule that has to be approved, submitted, and approved by village staff prior to commencement of construction. All the landscaping improvements have to be completed before the issuance of a certificate of occupancy. Also the resurfacing of Elm and Green Bay Road must be done before the certificate of occupancy. There's provisions that I think we're going to talk about regarding construction traffic. There's a requirement that there be a construction and traffic management plan that is approved by the village, again, prior to any building permit being issued. That provision in the development agreement talks about that the village has the ability to designate routes of access during construction for the construction process. There is a provision I think we're going to talk about also regarding non-interference with businesses. That's Section 5J. And then there's the general provisions about the quality, the timing, and the specificity with regard to all of the improvements. The development agreement requires that the developer reimburse the village for pay village, all applicable village fees, which includes building permit fees under our current municipal code provisions, as well as village fees, including attorney's fees and other fees required in the municipal code related to the development. The developer has agreed to provide the required performance security, which includes a letter of credit equal to 110% of the estimated cost of the public improvements, and then that is to be replaced after acceptance of those improvements with a maintenance guarantee equal to 10% of the actual cost. The development agreement includes our standard indemnification provision, and then all of the general events of default and cure provisions that have been in previous agreements. So I'll stop there and answer any questions or however you want to proceed.
Questions for Peter?
Well, I don't have questions. I have a proposed amendment to the development agreement.
Okay, we'll get to that after.
Yep.
Any questions for Peter?
Peter, so the staff has the power, if you will, to impose provisions on the timing of construction. We heard from business owners at the last meeting about their concern about the holiday season. Does the staff have the ability to limit construction?
As part of the construction schedule, yes.
They could do that. Okay.
Others? Okay, why don't we take some time and hear from the applicant? You guys want to tell us what's going on?
Members of the council, ladies and gentlemen. Again, Hal Frank with the law firm of Meltzer, Pertil, and Stell on behalf of J.P. Morgan Chase Bank. We're pleased to be back before you again. We are hopeful that this evening you do adopt the ordinance granting preliminary plan development approval and that you do approve the development agreement, because as you heard at the last meeting, time is and has become of the essence with respect to this project. We are fine with the condition that Mr. Schoen made reference to being added to the plan development ordinance that he highlighted in his presentation. The only thing we would like to do this evening is have the project architects from Gensler tell you, as David indicated, they have been working on some concepts to address, on a concept to address the comments we heard at the last meeting about the design, the project design, so that we can get some initial feedback from all of you on that, and long before the council is considering an ordinance approving a final plan. So with that, if Scott Hurst is with us from Gensler. He's put together a short PowerPoint presentation, and if I could, I'd like to turn the floor over to him.
Sure.
That's pretty.
At Iceland?
I want to go there. Looks like it.
Thanks, Hal, and thank you all for giving us another opportunity to meet with you all today, get your feedback. We are excited to share with you some of the progress that we've made and some of the developments over the past 2 weeks. It's been a busy 2 weeks to come up with some ideas that both work with the design intent and some of the comments that we heard today. Before diving right into the comments, we wanted to kind of take a step back, and I felt like we owed it to you guys to sort of kind of recognize where we've been over the past year since you guys had originally seen this project, and some of the things, some of the ideas that are really driving the design. As you guys are all very much aware, being residents here in Winnetka, how special it is to be nestled between the forest reserves and Lake Michigan. And we've really kind of keyed in on that when it comes to some of the design elements throughout the building, particularly even on the interior of the building. Specifically that line, that diagonal line that connects Winnetka to the city, or in some ways allows you to escape from the city up to Winnetka, being this really interesting dynamic that not only defines the broader village, but also our site and the unique and sometimes challenging geometry of our site, but also affords us that wonderful corner that we're going to talk a lot about today. That line, of course, is Green Bay Road. That line, of course, is the train that has really spurred the development all the way up through the North Shore, all the way up to Milwaukee. That train and all of the villages that dot it become this really great series of communities. And one of the comments that we heard throughout the process, of course, is that this is not the city, this is a village, and that our design thinking and our rationale for the design should take into account the scale of the village. Something else that was struck us as we really dug into this project was, of course, that old Electroline train, the original sort of North Shore line, and that Art Deco style. Art Deco came up a lot in our conversations as not only a style that was meant to symbolize modernity, but is also a style that is very much appreciated within Winnetka's actual design guidelines. And so we did kind of look to the Art Deco style to sort of borrow some influences, borrow some of that architectural language, specifically as we started to design some of the details of the building, some of which we've accentuated for you today. Throughout the year, as we've met with some of the other boards, some of the prevailing ideas that we've put forth were direct results of those conversations and the guidelines themselves, particularly conversations around setbacks. The top right image talks about articulation, about public entries should have a special large-scale approach that'd be open and inviting, as well as the vertical rhythm that breaks down the facade of the building to break the roof lines and create interest along the facade. Again, I apologize, it's hard to read, but those are quotations directly from the guidelines that we really use to inform the way the design comes together. So breaking down of the building's facade into horizontal bands, providing human scale and proportion to the facade. We talk a lot about that as we refer to the limestone base of the building. Public entries should be located along main thoroughfares and at the corners. All of those elements, even down to the rhythm of the columns that telegraph through to the facade are again, direct translations of the guidelines themselves. So that brings us to kind of where we are. This is what you guys have seen. This is what was presented on June 4th. And some of as David mentioned, some of those key comments were reduced perceived bulk on the corner element, study and develop the detailing at the brick corner, and explore more interesting or less brick at what we refer to as the quarter-turn feature element up at the top of the building. So here you're seeing some of the changes that have been made. Granted, some of those changes are subtle, but we are confident that they work with the programming of the building, the engineering of the building. We've been vetting these over the past 2 weeks. And essentially what we've done is enlarge the amount of glass on that corner element to kind of thin up the overall appearance. Introduced a decorative brick frieze at the top of the building, and then made some additional height adjustments to bring down the overall scale of the building while still emphasizing the vertical lines and keeping with the Art Deco aesthetic. So more specifically, we lowered the limestone base 6 inches. So that brought that scale down to a little bit more of a pedestrian-friendly scale. We've increased the amount of glass by 17%. So that came from lifting up the head or the top of the glass line, and in doing that, actually reducing the amount of brick on the frieze and the cornice above by 14 inches. And then most importantly, really started to develop how we can articulate that frieze in a way that is unique and specific to Winnetka. So getting into that for a brief moment, we mentioned this motif of being connected to the woods and the water. That frieze is still a work in progress. We want to be clear that that's certainly not set, but it is heading in a direction that we all feel really good about. This idea of waves and leaves, even taking some reference from the Winnetka seal as well, to kind of build in some detail that is very specific to this building and very specific to your community. This is an enlargement of, again, where we are in the process of defining and developing that element that would be on that celebratory corner of the building. In addition to all of those changes that happen on the sort of on the vertical axis of the building, the elevations of the building, we also wanted to point out that we've taken those brick piers, those pilasters, and pushed them in to the building. So they originally protruded 6 inches further out than all of the other piers of the building, giving it a little bit more of a prominent position and a prominent aesthetic. So here you can see this is the corner of the building here. This is a diagram showing the dash line indicates where they previously were, and we've pushed them back in, and now they create alignment along that street elevation. So just a quick summary of all of the little moves that we've made here that I think ultimately result in something that still feels proportional, still feels in the spirit of the original intent of the building, hopefully addressing some of those concerns, lowered that limestone base by 6 inches, eliminated 8 inches of brick above the window heads along the entirety of those elevations, eliminated 14 inches of brick at the corner, reducing the amount of mass overhead, increased the corner window size by 17%, added that really custom Winnetka frieze to the top of the building, and pushed the corner pilasters in 6 inches to align along the street edge. Again, a lot of little moves that all kind of work in harmony with one another. It's kind of as much art as it is science, trying to balance when you move one thing, something else looks out of proportion or out of plane. Doing all of those in a way that still works with the engineering and the underlying programming of the building. So thank you again. Would be happy to answer any questions or any additional comments. Thank you.
Let's talk. Would you all like to share your initial responses to what
My
you're
initial
seeing here?
response is that is a big improvement. So,
Thank you. We're actually really excited about it as well. We think there's some nice moves here.
I guess one question I have, I think you called them pilasters, or the things that have been pushed back 6 inches. Is that necessary? Because I think if it comes out 6 inches, it creates more articulation. Maybe explain the thinking of why you push that back to be more, I guess, it makes does that make the facade feel more, I guess it seems to reduce that articulation that you were trying to go for.
We were reluctant to offer that up, I do admit, because that articulation, the treating those corner and entry elements as special as opposed to being consistent with the rest of the elevations was something that, again, came about multiple conversations with the design review committee and our own internal team, as well as the Winnetka guidelines. We do quite like how they poke out a little bit just to create a little bit more interest along the street edge. One of the things that we've been really intentional about doing is, even though this isn't a very large building, it is large for this community, and we wanted to make sure that as you walk along the street, you get that rhythm and you get that diversity of a more typical building size. And so having the corner elements come in and out, having the entry elements come in and out, and even having the westernmost and northernmost portion of the building set back even further provides a scale that was actually studied in relationship to all of the other storefronts. So, it's about a 40-foot storefront that makes the sort of typical rhythm, and that's more or less what you're seeing here. So to answer your question, sorry, that was a long-winded. We would love to keep those, but we did want to make sure we were addressing some of the comments around just the massiveness of that corner.
Yeah, no, I can see that. But I personally think that it would be better to have them, to your point, to your original design intent. I'm not as worried about bulk there, mid-block, so to speak, or mid-building. I think it was kind of at the corner, and as your eye looked up, it just looked heavy. I think
Could you go back to the comparative?
that's very helpful.
Yeah, one of the things that I just want to point out, and obviously we've been all staring at this quite a long time, so I appreciate some of these changes might appear subtle, is by lifting up that window head 14 inches, or I'm sorry, 1 foot 2 inches, 14 inches. It actually lifts up higher than all of the rest of the window heads. We've actually lifted the ceiling in that space as well. So at night, there will be quite a nice effect, really making sure that corner feels special. We are also planning on providing exterior illumination on the building, so those pilasters, that rhythm that we talked about, will also be accented, as well as the frieze that we just discussed. But that little step in the facade of where the corner windows poke up, I think does break it up in a way that maybe the previous iteration was lacking. So we are excited about that move.
And then I noticed that to the left, you've got different type of windows. You had like a 3-panel picture window situation. Now you've got a 4-panel. Is there a reason for that?
Oh, these windows here.
Yeah.
I think the spacing of those are still a little bit in flux. We can work to refine those. We're just working again with some of the rhythms there on the corner. On that one front one, we do have a 3-panel. So again, that's something we can finesse a little bit.
Are those wider or just higher? I guess those are higher. That's a bigger window?
Those are higher as well.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
This corner, this window, and this window all step up. Everything that's contained within the sort of corner volume step up.
Okay. Well, I think the frieze looks a lot better. It doesn't look as, so I appreciate
Go ahead,
the
Kim.
work that you've done.
Oh, I'm sorry, Tina. Kim?
Oh, thank you. I do see that you all have made a lot of changes over the last couple of weeks. I want to step back just a little bit. I'm really excited about this project, and I would imagine you and Chase are too. I picture this being what I'm going to call like a landmark building, meaning people will say, I'll meet you at the corner of the Chase building, or you head south on Green Bay Road and turn right at the Chase building. In other words, it's truly a landmark in town that people recognize, and it's something distinctive and special. And I would imagine that's something you're certainly striving for too. I'm still a little bit troubled that I raised these points last week, and I know David mentioned them in the introduction of how we went from the concept we saw that was a limestone. And again, I mentioned last week, I was very sold on the whole the logic and the story that you told us about what was behind the original concept, in that the limestone was a bookend or a nod to our village hall. There were the arched windows. I mean, I know the clock could come and go, but that was a nod to, again, a real traditional bank building, yet with a modern twist. And we went from that to something very different to the DRB. I'd love to hear why you significantly changed the whole concept of the exterior before it went to the DRB, what the reasoning was for that.
Sure. So some of it was brought on by just our client's desire to have an aesthetic that maybe wasn't necessarily looking back towards what the building used to look like, and again, kind of captivated by that idea of Art Deco when it was, a popular style. Was meant to embody modernism and modernity. And we felt that aesthetic did not only work with something that was suggested or recommended by the village guidelines, but something that does fit in to the broader neighborhood. Some of the conversations that were had with the design review boards, with the design review committee, specifically pointed out the materiality as being something that we really wanted to. Brick came up over and over again in those conversations. In fact, as you guys mentioned, at one point we had terracotta, and that was even discouraged through some of those conversations to be more in keeping with the character of the neighborhood. This brick is not specifically matching any of the bricks that are there today, but it is very much in the same hue. It is a local brick. It is intended to feel, part of the broader neighborhood. And then again, just a careful study of the guidelines that we wanted to, not take word for word, but certainly present to you guys with a design that we felt was defensible and met the spirit of the guidelines when it came to the overall articulation of these facades. So rather than try to mix or blur two very different architectural aesthetics, resulting in something that we didn't feel was sort of a pure representation of what we were trying to achieve. We moved forward with the kind of true to the Art Deco style in a way that we thought was very complimentary, particularly to the corner. I think if there was one critique that I could maybe provide with the initial concept is, while we would have been very happy with that as a handsome building, to your point about this being a landmark building, the acknowledgement of the corner here is, we all feel much stronger in this scheme, and much more in keeping even with the height that's currently there. If we were to bring it all the way down to the 45-foot tall height that's prescribed to us in the zoning guidelines, I think we would all miss how that corner is handled and how it really does become a gateway to the central business district.
Okay, I know that one graphic just walked up, but that's not the one I'm talking about. I'm talking about the one that was presented to us a year ago. And I'm sorry, I know our process usually works very well with all of our complementary boards who all have their input. But in this case, I don't know, I'm concerned how everyone took away from our village council meeting to, take away so many of the elements that were so compelling in the presentation. And we're looking now, it's a lovely building in many ways, especially as you've revised it, but we've taken away sort of what we were presented with originally as the whole concept and logic for what was going to be behind the design of the building. I guess I'm going to also go back to the terracotta elements. I learned more about that just as we all left the meeting. I wanted to learn more and learned that was really it's a very special traditional technique. And for buildings, I understand that some architectural or some buildings that couldn't afford terracotta started substituting brick designs for it. Again, I sense that you are an architect and Chase as your client wants to build something that really is using some of the best materials and design features. And so can you tell me a little bit about, even if we had to go with this brick building, how terracotta would or would not fit into this design?
Well, twofold to answer the comment specifically around terracotta. One, we were asked specifically to move away from terracotta throughout some of the prior conversations and work with the brick material. And then two, despite it being a traditional material, modern examples and uses of terracotta are still somewhat limited and are still very, very, very pricey. So from just from a cost standpoint, terracotta would be prohibitive as well. So we were, again, working with the palette that was sort of prescribed to us and doing it in a way that really elevated the medium of brick, paying extra attention to every row of brick on this building when it comes to creating shadow and depth and texture and detailing and ornamentation that would make this a building that we feel like would be something that would be proud for generations. And then again, going back to the departure from their original design, yes, recognizing that design did recall the old bank, it was really a flat roof that maintained a flat sort of gesture at the corner. And so through the conversations with the design review board, as well as our client, something that celebrated these corners and the entry points was requested. So that's how we kind of departed from that maybe initial massing concept to the refined design that you have here today.
Okay, well, thank you. I realize you have many, many people pulling you in many directions.
Yes, ma'am.
If I may, following up on that first question, what are the dimensions? What's the height dimension now? It looks like the corner has become lower. What's the new elevation here?
So the corner is at 51 foot 6 inches, which is actually what was in our elevations and will be in the documents that we would submit for formal approval. The rendering that was presented on the 4th actually does show it taller than that. It shows it about 2 feet taller than that, actually.
Okay.
So what is on the right-hand side of the screen is 100% accurate to what we would be proposing. Beyond that, to maintain the relationship between that taller element and the parapet that runs along the typical bay, we did actually lower that parapet a little bit So now all of those other parapets are below the 45-foot datum line or the 45-foot mandate. It's at 44-foot 10 inches, which constitutes about a 1-foot 2-inch drop from what we previously depicted. So again, everything affects another thing, right? So we didn't want to just lower the corner element because then the building would feel, believe it or not, actually heavier. So maintaining the height while reducing the parapet height allowed us to keep that sort of relationship between the two
I think
elements.
the rendering is, a little, that was what I was looking at. It was a little misleading, just looking at the stoplight.
The stoplight's how you can tell, yeah.
You know, but anyway, and I just want to go back, and I'm not going to speak for Trustee Handler here, but the original building, which you as an architect presented, was a limestone building. There must have been a reason why you felt that was the right architecture to have for this building. And I'm not an architect, but I did like the look of that. I think, everyone had their own opinions on it, but I think there was general thought that it was an attractive building. So we've gone away from that. Design Review Board never saw that, I don't believe, that building. I think you came in with the brick and terracotta building to the Design Review Board. So they never saw what we saw, unless they went back and looked at the minutes. So my question, I guess, is, as an architect, you presented the limestone. Why is this, what we're looking at right here, the better alternative for this important building, as Trustee Handler, and I think we all feel this way, stated? Why is this better than that limestone building that seemed very distinguished and had a lot of features that were of interest?
Sure. So the limestone building was more in the neoclassical style, and it was very stoic. Distinguished is a great word for it. I do like, and just as the building that we're in today is very, very distinguished as well. I think some of the commentary around just the quaintness, the sort of character, the warmth, and the charm of the village really did push us to look at bringing the scale of some of those gestures, some of those elements kind of down to be at a much more human scale. You know, as we walk around the village here, it's very, very rare, if ever, would you see 60 feet of one facade, of one sort of monolithic, expression, even if the materiality is relatively consistent throughout the neighborhood. So as we kind of looked to develop that, breaking down the scale of that facade was one of our primary objectives. Doing it in a way that felt like it had integrity of its own and not necessarily holding on to that kind of initial massing concept. So again, I think it came down to, and then specifically to speak to the switch between materials, I think we are all, especially as an architect, drawn to the sort of human scale of a brick. Bricks were made to fit in the palm of a hand for one person to be able to lay it onto a building. If you look at the size of the windows, if you look at the heights of the buildings around here, the 30 to 40 foot sort of module of a bay or of a storefront, all of those are much more in keeping with, I'd say, the direction that you see here on the screen today than the very stoic kind of neoclassical building that was presented previously. I do think there were some comments that said that maybe got in our heads about that building felt like it might have belonged in downtown Chicago, or I think the original building that was not on this site but actually in New York felt very Manhattan, and we wanted to do something that spoke to the neighborhood, not necessarily the legacy of J.P. Morgan.
So this is I'll call it a warmer feel for the location in Winnetka, more like an old shoe, a good fit for this town. So as an architect, this is your preference versus what was originally presented to us.
I think this is a much more appropriate response to the site and the conditions around the site and the village, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Question? On your revised elevation, on that frontage that's running down Green Bay, it might just be how the rendering came out, but if you notice the panels between the second and the third floor, the brick panels that are below the windows?
Yes.
Along the Green Bay side, they look creamy, kind of white, and then when you go on the other side, it shows infilled in brick. Are you guys thinking about those panels and what you might be able to do with them? Or was that just something that came up in the rendering program?
We are thinking a lot about those panels. I can go into depth explaining exactly what our intentions for those are. It is about 9 a.m. in the morning in this rendering, so the sun coming up from the east is blasting the Green Bay side of the building, and the other side is in shadow. So that's the distinction you see between those. There's two things happening at those spandrel panels. One, what we call a row lock of brick, which is a brick turned 90 degrees, so the short end of the brick is actually projecting out a little bit, creating a nice shadow line, picture framing that infill panel, which we're proposing a chevron or herringbone brick pattern, again, to recall some of that angular geometry that is inherent to the Art Deco style, as well as picking up on some of the motifs that we are exploring for the frieze itself. So that panel is a quote unquote kind of decorative panel, more tertiary compared to the decorative panel up at the top of the building.
Yeah. I'm not going to tell you how to design your building, but I think there's a real opportunity for you to do something really special and interesting in those panels. Something to think about.
Sure, we could take a look at that.
I was going to follow up with Chris's. I'm really taken with what you've done at the top with the design, and it draws your eye up so that you're not as much like looking at the building. You're like, ooh, look at that. And, I liked the terracotta. But in any event, I think Chris might be onto something with if you're still thinking about what to do there to make those interesting so that people look up at them and are like, oh, look at that one. They could even be different. I don't know. I'm not trying to design. You do not want my design opinion on that. But I think that that's...
Sure. We'll be sure to share some...
We don't want it to look cartoony or anything
right.
like that, but, something that maybe there's terracotta tiles with dollar signs on them for the bank that gets posted up there. I don't know, something like that.
Don't put that in the notes, right?
Oh, it'll be in the
Mr.
notes.
Moneybags from the Monopoly game or whatever it is.
But is it still possible to have terracotta in those spandrels? Or are you saying that's not possible anymore?
So the frieze and those panels that we're discussing right now in the spandrel panels, there are a number of different elements that we could look to put right there. One of the things we've been exploring is a hand-carved clay product, which is effectively terracotta, to create that relief. We did look at a metal panel that would be in the same oil rub bronze finish. It's not actually oil rub bronze. It's an aluminum panel. That actually, again, made it feel heavier, and keeping something that tonally resonated and kind of blended in with the rest of the building. I think a lot of our efforts here have been to really explore what we can do with the brick and use the brick in a way that created shadow and texture and depth without a lot of material changes, so the building didn't feel too fussy or frenetic. There's, to your point, there's a warmth to brick that is sort of generationally appreciated. So sticking within that material palette was something that we are still keen on. Terracotta is kind of an extension of brick, so yeah, we can continue to explore what that material actually is.
It's just visual interest is my only
Visual
concern.
interest,
Yeah.
understood.
Others?
I've got a handful of things. The frieze above the entries on Green Bay and Elm, are you envisioning this similar motif that would translate over there as well?
There's no reason it couldn't. As it is currently depicted, we were reserving that for the special corner, but there's nothing that would prevent us from being able to include it over the two entry points.
I would suggest, without being too busy and different everywhere, that I think I'm responding. I actually like the original vertical when it was terracotta, or at least that concept, but what you presented with the motif is a cool play, and if you extended that elsewhere so it doesn't feel like it's a one-off and make it more integral, and like President Rintz had suggested, maybe something between the second and third floor, right? I mean, channel your inner, whatever you want to take, Louis Sullivan or whoever, right?
Yep.
Yeah,
Louis Sullivan.
and see what you can do. I'm going to agree 100% with everything Tina said. In fact, I would like to be adamant that you should not push the building back 6 inches at the corner. I think that's actually going to do a disservice to what you're trying to accomplish. And I would just, so I'll strong support for keeping it the way it was. I have some questions. Well, and actually just to finish up on the brick, the color of the brick, like at the soldier course that you have above the windows and at the top of the parapet, it's rendered as a lighter color. Are you envisioning like 2 different types of brick?
No, we're not. That is just a result of the rendering. We are envisioning all the brick to be the same mix of tones. The brick itself does have, a lot of movement and character to it. So it's certainly not a homogeneous brick, and we would be happy to share samples with that. We're actually mocking up a few options in the next couple of weeks to make a final selection.
If your client is so inclined and you're interested, I think the way it's rendered, it looks like, and the soldier course is the vertical standing brick above the windows and at the very top of the building. I think there's actually a little bit of very subtle, not strong, but if you were to convince your client you wanted to do 2 different colors or types of brick that were extremely complementary, you had to look closely to notice, but that might give you a way to cheat and give that more visual interest and relief without having to, break the bank on $ cast terracotta or something.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
Questions on the windows, and I know you mentioned you hadn't further defined at the corner element, what those windows are, but just can you take a step back, and do you have any other visuals that show the renderings along the main elevations, not the corner? And or if not, can you describe what you're envisioning? Are those just extruded aluminum, or are we talking like a sand color? What are you envisioning for those windows? Would they be
So
operable?
those windows are a standard curtain wall or window wall system with an extrusion. They have a profile that goes around the edge that is meant to sort of emulate what a double hung window would look like. So there's a little bit more thickness, a little bit more shadow around the aluminum frame itself, and then a intermediate horizontal, again, just to break down the scale. Obviously there's not a lot of big expanses of glass anywhere in the village, so we wanted to make sure we were bringing that scale down. On this presentation, I do not have any in-depth imagery of that. I do actually have my computer if you're interested.
That's okay.
I could pull
Your
it together.
description's fine. On the new rendering, you don't have a center horizontal, whatever, mullion or imitation sash. It's up above. It's like you've got a more of a transom window type look.
We did raise it on the revised elevation above the sight line rather than having it be,
Right.
it was kind of hitting right at sight line, so we pushed it up out of the way. Yeah.
Can I just suggest?
Sure.
There was off-the-record side comments. There were more than one person that thought the building looked like a school last time around. And I think with that double-hung sort of imitation look, that really conveys, and especially with the tall, narrow cylinder, it felt like a pre-war school building. Nothing wrong with it, but I think just seeing on the new rendering the horizontal mullion being up above, and maybe there's not an Art Deco connoisseur, but I think if you were to do something that might be more appropriate for the period and that style, that might get away from that double hung window look. I think that might help improve the building. And then now transitioning to the windows at the corner element. Like I said, I know you said you haven't further flushed that out. My reaction when I see this is it feels like a little bit 80s corporate. In terms of, just there's, and I know you haven't worked on the design of that, but I think there's an opportunity with the additional glazing to add the same level of thought and care and detailing. Not necessarily you have to have these crazy detailed window frames, but just the overall style, the placement of the glass, how you divide things up, to use that to accentuate the Art Deco feel, or to either play along with just like you have a lot of the repetition in the slender, tall look along the elevations, you lose that at the corner. And I would encourage you, and I provided some comments at staff, if there's a way, whether you could do it like an actual brick course to, very narrow, or vertical brick course to break up the glass, but something, or just entire expansive glass in whatever the frame is, to really accentuate that that same sort of thinness, tall, slender.
Yep.
You know, still keeping the transparency. I really am not crazy about the windows the way they are right now, but I know it's not finished. Couple other questions or just comments about that, like just like you've raised the center mullion on the other elevations, maybe there's an opportunity to add that, whether it's actually at lower, just something, right, to break that up a little bit so it's not just a big expanse of glass. Regarding, remind me again, what is the use of these two rooms on the second and third floor at the corner?
The second floor is a conference room, and the third floor is a formal boardroom.
Okay. Have you thought through ceiling treatments for those rooms?
We're in the process of working through that right now, knowing that the ceiling is certainly a canvas that's visible from the street.
Yeah, I would just highly encourage you to not do drop ceilings or ACT, or to really, because I'm guessing you'll probably have, right, some sort of window screen or curtains or blinds or something because of the sun, but it's going to be a 24/7 sort of visible thing. And, you know, doing a drop soffit in front of like that second floor window, which you can visibly see here, and then doing like an ACT ceiling is really going to
100% agree.
It's not going to help.
We are working through all of that right now, down to the lighting, to make sure those rooms feel illuminated, that there's even illumination on this corner, so that they feel connected. And
I would encourage you and your client, if you could go as far as even think about, you know, non-traditional ceiling treatments in those spaces with lighting to help support it, and even like the second floor with that drop soffit in front of the glass, you know, it's okay, but it sort of reinforces that corporate economical feel.
We're working through some of the details right now of how we can hold that soffit back. We do have, you know, mechanical systems that we're going to have to contend with, and we certainly don't want to see those from the street. So but understood and couldn't agree more.
Great. Outside of that, if there's other detailing you can add, like the soldier course, the whatever the motif is, to really lean into the Art Deco instead of just having it. And I mean, you want people to really feel it without even knowing what it is. And I think I get it when you describe it as Art Deco, but when I first see it, I don't see enough of it for it to really play into that style. So I encourage you to do more of that. And I think the motif's a great place to start with that.
Great.
Thank you.
Tina, you had mentioned you had some something you wanted to talk about relative to the development agreement.
Yeah.
Now would be a good time.
Okay. Well, I'm just going to respond to something that Kirk said. So you're saying you would like brick here between?
Suggestion, a way to break up. I mean,
Because then that really feels like my high school.
some way to accentuate the verticality, like you have down the, you know, the long face of the elevation, right? Especially with the shadow lines, like we're looking in these angles.
Because one of the things I really like about this is, as you step back, I do like how much, especially this design over what we first saw in concept, just how big the windows are, how many windows there are. It just is going to feel so much lighter on Green Bay in particular. And just when your previous slide, you know, I was just thinking, and when I was driving Green Bay today, just the addition of trees there on Green Bay is just going to improve that part of the village and just that entrance part. Because right now, and I think it's because of the curb cuts that break up the space, you know, having, you know, 2 curb cuts, and we're going to be elongating the building, that the trees are just going to make a difference too and help soften that. It's just going to look really nice, I think. But I like the windows, so just for feedback. In terms of what I suggested was, and I don't think it's that major of a change, but for the development agreement, I would like to see something more formalized to get at the concept of mitigating it. In the development agreement, it's on page 19 under section J, section 5J. It's 157 of our packet. category of non-interference with businesses, the development agreement is really between the village and Chase. I would like something a little bit more formalized for the non-interference with businesses. And this harkens back to when I did a lot of work for Walmart. And we regularly would have to agree to, as part of the development agreement or maybe the construction management traffic plan, as I suggested earlier today, but to put in this concept of that Chase has to come in with a plan to mitigate the interference with the business operations of the businesses just on that block. I mean, I'm not going to try to, we know that there's going to be impacts. There's not going to be zero impacts. But if we can have some sort of plan showing that Chase has met with the businesses, understands the unique delivery schedules of, for instance, the bookstall, Bunny and Babe, to understand what their pinch points will be, that we can have that as part.
Do you have language?
Of course I do.
Then just read it.
Propose an amendment to require Chase to submit a plan to mitigate interference with business operations for the village to review and approve as part of the construction management and traffic plan, and to form this mitigation plan. Chase will meet with the surrounding businesses and understand their distinct operational needs.
Not that specific.
You asked for language. You got it.
I think that's a good idea, Tina.
Have we asked this of other construction projects in town that are in business districts?
No,
Did you
and
say
I was
specific?
thinking about that, Kim, because I think we didn't have, at One Winnetka, we really didn't have anybody come out and, talk about how it's going to, particularly impact their delivery at Christmas of books. And I think that was a miss, thinking back on that. I don't think it's a huge lift. We're not asking Chase to, have zero, impact on surrounding businesses. It's just really to, think about how the businesses work and, formalize the requirement to sit down with them and present that to the village as part of the construction management and traffic plan.
To the village staff,
Yeah,
not the council.
no,
Okay, I just
yeah.
want to,
No, I don't need to get into
Yep.
deliveries, and it just is, it's one of these things that, like Hal, I've been a land use lawyer a long time, you find out when you talk to the businesses that there's easy things to do, that, by sharing and communicating with the businesses, they will know that, for instance, construction on the job site will maybe end around 3 o'clock, whatever. And then they will know that they can tweak their business deliveries. And so I think it's that process of formalizing that, sitting down with the businesses, I think would go a long way to address a lot of the anxiety that they have. And also, village residents who are loyal fans of these businesses, right? And want to make sure they continue to thrive.
I agree. Hal, you got a problem with that? Okay. Anybody up here have a problem with that? You do? Bob? Kim?
Well, it's not so much I have a problem with it, but did we ask this of the, I'm sorry, I forgot the name of the real estate firm that's tearing down the French Institute? And will we now be asking this of everyone? Obviously, I want to make sure our local businesses are taken care of, but we also, I don't want to do things that also would delay a major project to make it even more painful in the long run for the businesses if
No,
they
and Kim,
can't get concrete delivered because for X, Y, and Z, and that's delayed 3 days, and so 3 days turns into 6, turns into 10. So I feel like if this is going to be a precedent and something we do,
Kim, each development agreement that we've entered into, there have been little special tweaks that have gone on. A good example is in One Winnetka, we require that applicant to meet regularly with their neighbors to review the construction process and everything else. We haven't asked that of others in the community or other projects. And some of this is an evolution, you know, I mean, we are now entering a very high-class problem here. We have a lot of new construction in an old town, and it's exciting, but we got some kinks to iron out. So, yes, it will be an evolving process, and I'm sure the next time around, that'll end up in there, and we'll think of something else that we need to do to protect the
I guess
community.
I would be supportive of a clause that's, I'll say, is just common sense and being a good corporate citizen.
Right.
Which Chase wants to be a good corporate citizen in our community. I would not want it to be onerous for the person trying to get a construction project done, but I also, of course, want, again, them to be courteous to their neighbors. So
And Kim, you're
if
not in the
that's-
room.
if that's- I listen to Tina's language, but I mean, I'd have to see it to make sure that that's what it accomplished.
The applicant's attorney is okay with it.
Okay.
The other.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I was just saying, I think the location here is a little different than One Winnetka. I mean, this is a central artery into town. We had the businesses show up. There are businesses all around here. They talked about the alley. This is a little bit different. And I know with One Winnetka, I remember it specifically, because I was so interested in it, they have a specific traffic flow of streets, and I'm sure that will be
Gonna
part
do
of
that.
this.
Sure.
I'm sure that'll be part. So the logistics of this from a staff standpoint, and I liked your language, Tina, but the logistics are super important with this particular project. And I still happen to think the timing is critically important. We learned about the holiday season, and that's a real issue. So,
Yeah, and Kim, I just want to address your concern. I'm not suggesting that this is going to be any big thing. It's just an element, and to your point, any good corporate citizen, general contractor would do those things. I'm just asking that it's formalized. They're already going through a very detailed submittal on construction traffic and management. I think it's just easy to add it to that they, are required to actually meet with the businesses, because sometimes they don't, right? And I think that would be a miss. I think people would be upset about it, and I think it's an easy addition.
Agreed. I think we're there.
And for what it's worth, in Lincoln Park, when we had projects going up, this kind of thing was added in frequently, and sometimes it's as simple as giving a name and a phone number for when something's not going right, you can call this person. So it's not anything out of the ordinary, and I think it's probably something they're happy to do, as has already been indicated. So
Yeah.
I think it's a
they're
good
already
addition.
going to have to get into the buildings next door for seismic
to.
studies, right? So, yeah. Anyway, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, that's good, thank you.
Are we good now? I'd like to get to public comment. We okay? Okay. Now's the time for public comment. Anybody who would like to speak on this item may approach and give us your 3 minutes worth. Time's up.
Hi, Teresa Lucas, owner of Good Grapes. I'm here without Stephanie because candidly she's going through radiation and she's in bed by now. So I thought it was a great discussion. I just wanted to give feedback on some of it, and it's not in any particular order because it's just my chicken scratch. As the architect mentioned, this is a large building for the community. And as Chris, you mentioned, there's always little things you put in, right? Or you try to, I guess. So I appreciate it's a standard agreement, but I think all of that needs to come together a little bit more. And I also appreciate the mitigating circumstances, but I think, and I think that's very different than incentivizing people to come into the village. I think they're separate. And in terms of FedEx and UPS, I'm speaking behalf on now of Stephanie's 60 to 100 cases. Just so you know, they come in the morning, and I'm not saying you need to meet with them. I'm just trying to cover it when she's not here. And you don't get to derail them, right? They deliver in the morning and pick up in the afternoon. You see the same guy twice. So just something to keep in mind, that there's some flexibility, but there's not a ton. I mean, they're not here for that. And then, and I like David's comment about, minimizing the impact on businesses, but in the spirit of candor, I think we really need to take it more than discussion. And so the last time that we were here in this room, I think it was 2 weeks ago, there were comments on Chase being a good neighbor and Chase wanting to be part of the community and not a disruption. So there's no way to get around that a 16 to 20 month construction project is a disruption. We can debate the words, but it's a disruption, excuse me, and it's at the corners of Elm and Green Bay, which is the entrance. And it's a significantly long disruption. And we can debate it, but we know from Streetscape, people do not want to drive their cars through construction, and they're not going to. I can speak to my own personal revenue loss that I was floored by, and the phone calls. So I think that there's a difference with that. So I'd like us all to walk the talk. So as I sent in an email, I'm requesting that Chase Bank, I and with some others, we've had a little team together, and we've actually enhanced how that would work. I didn't bring that because I only have 3 minutes. That supporting a monthly event in downtown Winnetka. And quite candidly, it's not even a rounding error. It's so small to do that. It's not even a rounding error in Chase's budget for this project. It's so insignificant. I can't even imagine it would be $1,000 a month. I think it matters. I think it should be taken into consideration. You guys do you do the Chicago Marathon, the U.S. Open. I went to the website. There's festivals all around the country. So why not Winnetka on a smaller scale? I just think it's something that should be included, and that's being part of the community. That's helping to avoid the disruption. That's helping to bring people into the community. And so that's really the request. I'm going to skip a lot because some of it you guys already talked about. But I'm concerned, and I think that we need to walk the talk. And I truly know you all mean well by putting these things into like the development agreement, but then there's the fact of what happens when you leave, right? Because the language is kind of nebulous or, very general. So I'm just going to, like the streetscape, we're going to get a weekly update. It never said that there were supply chain issues, not once. And that project was a mess. And so I would like you to consider getting tangible deliverables. Meeting with the business owners who are impacted by the alley, that's a tangible deliverable. And I'd like Chase to consider supporting the business district that they're going to be disrupting for 16 to 18 months. Thank you.
Folks at Chase, you've heard that? Okay. Any others?
Mr. President, if you'd like me to respond, we're happy to add that to the discussion when we're talking about everything else we talked about this evening.
Sure. That'd be great. Okay, any last thoughts up here? We think we're ready to go? Okay. Let's see what we got here then. All right. We've got a couple things to do here, right? Okay, so the first one is a motion to adopt ordinance number M08-2024. Now, is this where Tina's goes in? Okay, you'll be the next one, so. We're going to need you to say what you want us to put in there.
The development next.
Yes. Okay. All right. This is ordinance number M08-2024. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Can I get a second?
Oh, sorry.
We're going to let this fail for a second?
No, is there going to be comments on this? Okay.
Second.
Okay. Now, somebody wants to say something?
Does the language that was added about the bulk and mass,
The bulk and
the bulk and mass, that's part of this ordinance, I believe, or resolution, or
You
what?
added some language in, right?
Does that cover the discussion adequately for some of the suggestions that were made? I don't know that it does sufficiently. Where's that page, Peter? You think of what? Page 62? Yeah.
Can you click back to that, David, or?
So that's section 9 under conditions H, building materials, except the design elements and massing of the portion of the building. I think we covered, you had several issues, Kirk had several issues, Tina had issues. I think that the final development agreement should incorporate more than just what is described here. I don't have the language. I just know there was more discussed than just talking about the bulk and the mass.
What page is that,
This is
Bob?
page 62.
I'll see if I can take a crack at it. Hold on.
Because I think a lot of the suggestions were well-received, number one, by the architect, and two, just would improve the building
Well, it's-
beyond what is.
You know, and clearly, we have to all acknowledge that this is a process, and we're not specifying any certain installation, but we are trying to direct the process a little bit to see if we can get closer to what people expect.
So is the intent is that the intent to give us flexibility to move the preliminaries forward so that then they come back at,
David, can you put that up on the screen? That language?
with the understanding that they come back, addressing these issues, taking our comments
Yeah, I
today?
mean, this is specific to the corner, and the discussion was
How
far
do we
more
do that?
expansive than the
Yeah.
corner.
That's a good point, Bob.
Okay, except design elements, except the design elements and massing of the portion of the building at the corner of Elm Street and Green Bay Road should be further studied and revised to reduce the mass and bulk of this portion of the building for consideration by village council as final PD. So you want to be more specific than that, Bob?
I'm more expansive. I
Or
think.
why
I
don't we
think
just, Bob, because it's going to be impossible to incorporate all of the comments.
Right.
So why don't we just refer to the comments made by the members of the council at this meeting?
But I think Bob is saying if you just take out of the
Portion
portion of the building and just say the massing of the building.
Correct.
I
Because the
agree.
portion is the corner that we were talking about.
Because then it's not limited in
Understood.
scope.
Mass and bulk of the building.
So
Okay.
Yeah.
remove portion of the, and then remove corner of Elm Street and Green Bay Road.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it stays the same.
You just kind of makes it, I agree with that.
You got that, Kim?
Yeah, except I was gonna say, we never brought it in for discussion, because I guess I would sort of like to maybe summarize,
That's what
after
what we're doing
hearing
now.
everything. Pardon?
That's what we're doing now.
Oh, okay, because we were starting to make a motion to approve.
Right.
So, okay, I guess I would just, I'd like to say that after hearing everything, including the architect's description of how he got to where he is, I really like the whole concept of the freeze and continuing to develop that more or replicate that in different ways, which I think Chris and you brought up. I do like this whole direction now of, again, looking with a nod to history, but yet being a modern building. I do think that, quite honestly, when it's built, it will look like it's always been there, which to me is a nice compliment. I would think the architect would think that's a nice compliment, that it's a new building, yet doesn't look old, but it looks like it's always been there. So that overall direction, but I agree that perhaps just narrowing what we're saying in terms of feedback to just say it's just the bulking of the corner, it is a little too narrow. I like the whole direction that this is going. And so if there's continued refinement that's beyond just the corner, which is, I think, what we've all said, I think that's good.
Right, and
Is
I think the way we're modifying Section 9 to take the focus away from the corner and speak more generally about the building will get us there. And if we add Peter's comments about the comments made by the participants of this meeting, I think that should give us some pretty solid ground to have a discussion when they come back to us.
Okay,
You okay with that, Kim?
that's good.
Are we all clear?
So it reads now,
Bob, before you say that, should we also, if we're getting rid of the portion and at the corner of Elm Street and Green Bay, should we then also on the next line get rid of this portion?
Yes.
Yes.
yeah, correct.
Who's got the pen?
And that's in keeping with, I think, to restrict the architect to us piecemealing the design is not the best advice. To look at it as a whole and make the building work as a whole is what's important.
I think we're all in agreement there. Does that look good?
Except the design elements.
Yep.
The design elements and massing of the.
Kirk, you still struggling?
I'm good. Thank you.
Could
Yes, right.
I make a suggestion
No?
to
We're gonna get
address
ready to
what you
vote.
just said?
Do you want to slow down the vote, or do you want to talk?
Well, I think I could make it simpler, this language.
You're winning.
Okay, Hal, you can't help yourself. I mean, really.
Just what you just said. All I have to say is be revised to reflect the comments of the village council
That's
on
what
the
we're
date
gonna
of
say.
adoption of this ordinance.
That's what we're going to say.
And that-
Yeah, okay.
I thought we were going to get out of here by 9. You got too many.
Hey, I
you
still have to drive home
attorneys.
from
I'm sorry.
downtown.
So Peter, you are adding that additional language about
Yes.
the council comments?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Can you add that language up on this so we can all see it, David? I'm sorry.
Where is it
I just want to make sure we have it right.
Yeah.
It is
After
right.
ordinance.
After ordinance, and to reflect the comments made by the council at the June 18, 2024 meeting.
Does that work? Nope.
Yeah,
Okay.
works.
Thank you.
All right, well, we have a motion and a second. We've had our comments and our discussions. I'm going to call for a roll call vote.
Excuse me. Motion made by trustee Dahlman, second by trustee Albinson. Trustee Dahlman?
Yes.
Trustee Albinson?
Yes.
Trustee Dearborn?
Yes.
Trustee Handler?
Yes,
Trustee Orsic?
Yes.
That motion carries. Now we'll move on to the development agreement. May I have a motion to adopt resolution number R54, 2024?
So moved.
Second?
Do we have any modifications to this?
My proposed modifications, as I previously stated.
Give it to us again.
Okay. To amend to require Chase to submit a plan to mitigate interference with business operations for the businesses on the block. Oh, I forgot to include that. For the village staff to review and approve as part of the construction management and traffic plan. And informing this mitigation plan, Chase will meet with surrounding businesses on the block and that share the alley to better understand their operations to minimize interference with said businesses.
Beautiful.
Oh, wow.
We all good with that?
Yes.
Not great.
Kim?
okay.
Okay, we all good? All right. Did I get a second on this?
Yes.
Yes, you did.
Okay, roll call vote.
Trustee Orsic?
Yes.
Trustee Albinson?
Yes.
Trustee Dahlman?
Yes.
Trustee Handler?
Yes,
Trustee Dearborn?
Yes.
All right, that motion carries. Good luck, gentlemen. Look forward to seeing you back soon. All right, moving forward, item 10, old business, none. Item 11, no new business, none. 12, appointments, none. And 13, closed session. Thank goodness there is none. Okay, item 14 is adjournment. May I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Voice vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
aye.
We stand adjourned. Thank you, everybody.